All right. Good morning, everyone. Keto Coffee cheers. It's been a little bit since I've done my last live stream, but I'm really excited about this topic because it's a really common question I see all the time on my YouTube, like videos, comments, in the Facebook group, just emails I get asking about if you can use intermittent fasting or what you should be doing at different ages with intermittent fasting. So the truth about this that I just want to start off first thing is that to some degree, intermittent fasting can be used at every age, as long as you don't have like a medical condition or that you're using some type of medication, like thyroid medication. Not that you can't use a thyroid medication, but it's one that you do have to make sure that it's fit within when you have to be taking that thyroid medication. So you can check in with your doctor on that. But as long as you don't have some type of condition, then shouldn't be a problem to be incorporating intermittent fasting at any age. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't things to consider at every age. So these are, it could be physiological barriers or even just lifestyle barriers that I've seen at various different types of ages when you go to incorporate intermittent fasting. So that's the main thing that I want to be focusing on today, because after meeting with hundreds of clients of all different types of ages, these come up on such a frequent basis that it would be silly for me not to bring them up. So with that in mind, guys, Keto Coffee cheers. This is our monthly live stream that we do. And next month, the monthly live stream will actually be the one announcing the summer intermittent fasting challenge. Very excited about that. I have a lot of exciting things coming up. So stay tuned, but that'll be next month's live stream. So for this month, we're talking about the intermittent fasting rules at age 20s, 30s, and 50 plus. So like I mentioned in the beginning, not necessarily that you can't do intermittent fasting at any age. It's just that there are certain things to consider at each age. So I will be answering questions throughout. So make sure you throw them in the chat and I'll say hello and I'll also answer some of those. But it's a lot easier if you add in like 4 question marks to the beginning and end of your question. If you do have a question, that way I can actually quickly filter through and see them as they come. Okay, I saw someone say videos buffering. Are you guys able to see me okay? Just let me know in the chat if you're able to see me. All right. Hi, Camille. Hey, Colin from Las Vegas. Wow, 7 p.m. Lithuania. Good evening. All right, perfect. Perfect picture and sound. All right, great. Glad to hear that. Okay, so you guys are probably not new here, but if you are, my name's Autumn, and I'm a certified clinical nutritionist with my master's in nutrition human performance. You're probably sick of me saying that. You're probably sick of hearing me say that, rather. But just always good to clarify so you know that there is some backing behind what I'm saying. So let's jump straight into the 20s. Now, this one is interesting because this theoretically should be one of the easiest times to implement, or at least to be able to start implementing intermittent fasting, just because usually this is when you are going to be the most insulin sensitive. You'll see that's not necessarily the case as we continue on with age, but this usually is the time that people are going to be the most insulin sensitive because you're younger and your body is just working at its most efficient level. Plus it doesn't have years and years of those high blood glucose, high insulin levels to cause insulin resistance. So theoretically, it should be easy to jump straight into intermittent fasting when you're in your 20s. But the common problem that I see happen all the time when people are in their 20s is that they just have a difficult time adjusting to an actual schedule. I know this was the case for me, and this is a case I see for a lot of my clients in their 20s, where we're used to, especially because we grew up in the age of having a lot of snacking or grazing, we're used to snacking and grazing throughout the day, or we're just not used to eating meals. I can definitely attest to that. That's how I was in college. You just kind of eat whenever you can and what's available to you. So especially if you're new to the workforce and you don't necessarily have, you're having a difficult time adjusting to working and having that schedule, or if you're a student, that's also a really big one, where if you're a student and maybe you have a lot of classes, you don't have a lot of time in between to be making a meal or planning out what you're going to be having for meals. All of this can make it a little bit difficult to then add on the extra layer of incorporating some type of intermittent fasting schedule. One thing I did want to note about the insulin sensitivity as well, guys, you know me, I have my whole thing here. It's actually 3 pages long of all the things we're going to be going over today. So I want to make sure that I hit everything for each of these categories. But one common thing that does come up is that even though people should be more insulin sensitive when they're younger, PCOS has gotten way more common lately. And a hallmark sign of PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome is having insulin resistance. So if that's the case, then there are additional factors to consider. But that is something, especially if you're a woman, to look into if you do have some level of insulin resistance, which unfortunately is becoming more and more common. Now, when it comes to this, the major steps, because when you are looking at a very busy schedule and being able to fit these meals in, we talked about this before in a previous live stream on how to actually schedule your eating window. And it's really important to actually determine when you're going to be having those meals, not just when your eating window will be. That's obviously the key feature of intermittent fasting, but when you're actually going to be eating those meals as well. That way, you're actually getting all those meals in at enough to actually get your nutrient needs. So dinner tends to not be the problem. Most people can find a time to be eating dinner, and that seems to be pretty simple. The one that seems to be a big problem for a lot of people, especially in their 20s, is lunch, or that middle meal, which that is usually what I recommend, is having that 3-meal structure with intermittent fasting. Or even if you have a 2-meal structure, that lunchtime or your first meal also can be a little bit of a tricky time, because depending on your schedule and the window that you're having, this lunchtime could be anywhere between 12 to like 3 p.m. Really just depends on what your schedule is. And if you don't have either a set lunch set in the middle of the day, like if you are in school still, or if you do have a lunch schedule, but your eating window doesn't line up with that, it's really important to first be able to plan when you're going to be eating that middle meal or lunch. And then also to be realistic about what that meal will be. You guys know I love to cook. You guys know that I love making these really amazing, beautiful meals, but it's also important to consider that we all have really busy schedules, and you need to be able to pick a meal that's going to fit your lifestyle as well as your schedule. So this is actually a huge thing you'll see coming up in the summer intermittent fasting challenge, but it's a big barrier that I see, not just for those in their 20s, but all over, but especially those in their 20s. So if you aren't able to prep some type of lunch and get that done consistently, then you need to also have a consistent plan B to go to that's going to cover your nutrient needs. So having just really, really, really easy lunch options available for that middle meal or for that lunch when you are using intermittent fasting, if you have that really busy schedule, is key. So some examples of this, obviously smoothies are really easy and great, and you can keep that in a thermos, make it earlier in the day, and then just keep in a thermos and shake it up before you're going to have it. I like that option because it's really not limiting the different nutrients that you're having, and you can bring that with you easily on the go. I have had people ask questions about that on if you can have a smoothie for lunch. Absolutely. But not only that, you do want to make sure it's covering all the guidelines that we always talk about on this channel. But you can just make it earlier in the day and shake it up. I've seen a lot of AM peeps do this, and it's a really easy way to make sure that you're actually getting something in that's going to satisfy your nutrient needs. Some other great options. You guys know I've been loving Greek yogurt, which that video is coming soon. And cottage cheese. Using either of those, which actually both are sneakily so packed with protein that you can get your full protein needs from that meal from Greek yogurt or cottage cheese. And they have those single serving packets where if you are on the go, you can just grab them, get some nuts and berries to throw on the side along with it and take it with you wherever you are. Even if you have to be eating in the car, for example, a smoothie or the Greek yogurt parfait or the cottage cheese bowls are really great options to have on the go. And then even a classic, just like hard-boiled eggs with the nuts and cheese, even that, again, like the adult snack pack, is something that you can consistently have and has very minimal, if not any prep. But in addition to that, also doesn't take a long time to eat, which if you are having a really busy schedule, that's something that can be a big problem too, is just even finding the time to eat the meal, not only prep, but to eat. So with those, especially in their 20s, being able to first off plan when you're going to have your meals. So know when you're typically going to have your first, your second, and your third, or your first and your second meals. Planning not just the window, but the actual timing of those meals can really help to ensure you're getting those in. And then also being realistic, especially about that middle meal, that lunch, or if you're doing a 2-meal structure, that first meal, because that seems to be the trickiest one. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to say about those in their 20s. That's the main factor with the 20s, really the schedules that I've seen, because it is pretty easy to jump straight into intermittent fasting when you are younger because people tend to be more insulin sensitive. So you're not going to experience as much of that hunger or difficulties transitioning because you're likely a little bit more metabolically flexible at this time, unless you have some degree of insulin resistance or PCOS. Okay, I see some questions on here. Before I get to the 30s, which has a lot of physiological differences, let's answer some of these. How do I know how insulin sensitive I am? That's a really great question. So you can get an insulin test done, and unfortunately it's not done super frequently by a lot of doctors' offices. You'll often get like the HbA1c, which is an average blood glucose level, which really doesn't tell you a lot about your actual fasting insulin level, and that's what will tell you about the insulin sensitivity. So you can ask your doctor about that, but you can just ask them for an insulin test, and that can help to determine insulin sensitivity or resistance. Hello from Portland, Oregon. Gosh, already stumbling over my words. Does alternate day fasting help heal the gut? From Sophia. So any type of fasting is going to help stimulate that migrating motor complex, which is something we talk a lot about, which is that gut cleaning process that helps flush out left behind food and bacteria, which is really important for cleaning out the gut. But you don't necessarily need to be doing extended fasts. As long as you're just having a more true fast, which is something that I talk about in the Gut Healing Guru protocol in the Level Up Guide, as long as you're having some amount of a true fast, that will stimulate the migrating motor complex. So not having coffee, not having tea, just having water, maybe some electrolytes during the fast. And even just having a daily, like I mentioned, 16-hour fast or a little bit shorter, a little bit longer, that can help to stimulate the migrating motor complex. Depending on the degree of gut healing that needs to be going on, it could merit a slightly longer one, but I always err on the side of just making sure you're getting enough nutrients in. All right. Enia, I'm sorry, I'm pronouncing that wrong. Hi, I'm here watching you for a few days now. Welcome. Welcome to the A and Peeps. So someone's asking about medication supplements and if they break a fast or if they break a fast to the point where you have to restart your fast. So I have a video that goes a little bit more deeper dive into this, but most supplements won't break a fast as long as it doesn't contain any sugar. Except for collagen, which is technically a supplement, or protein supplements, obviously still technically a supplement. Protein will break fast because it does cause some amount of insulin to go up, and collagen is a form of protein. But for most supplements that are like vitamins or minerals, they generally won't break a fast if they aren't in their gummy form, which I just don't generally recommend gummy vitamins because they sneakily add up in sugar. If you guys are taking gummy vitamins right now, just take a look, like go look at the bottle at how many grams of sugar in there, and look at how many servings you're having of that throughout the day. I've had some clients who will have like 3 different types of gummy vitamins that they're having, not even during a fast, just in general, that they're having multiple gummy vitamins. Each one of them had like 4 grams of sugar, and just from their vitamins, they're getting about 12 or 16 grams of sugar per day just from the vitamins and supplements. So it's definitely worth taking a look at your supplements to make sure that it's not one that's going to sneakily add up in sugar. And then, and in regards to medications, like I mentioned, there are, it really just depends on the medication. I know with thyroid medications, those need to be taken a certain distance away from food, which is why if you are using fasting and if you are using medications, definitely want to check in with your doctor, just because there's some that need to be taken with food, some a certain distance from food. So you just want to make sure that you have that all squared up with your doctor. When is the next challenge starting? Stay tuned. That announcement is coming fairly soon. We need more smoothie recipes. Stay tuned. Okay, I want to get on to 30s now. I know there's still quite a bit of questions on here, but just keep throwing them in there and I'll get to more at the end, but also answer some more in between. First, Keto Coffee. Okay, so with 30s, and really this can also seep into 40s a bit, but especially predominantly tends to be happening in the 30s. One really big change happens here. And this is that most people, not most people, but if you are going to be having kids, this is when you generally are going to be having kids. Obviously, this can happen in the 20s or even for some people in the 40s, but generally a lot of people have, if they're having kids, it'll be in their 30s. So a couple things happen and with intermittent fasting, or rather just your body when you're experiencing pregnancy, the body actually becomes more insulin resistant, which does serve a purpose when you are going through pregnancy. That does help to make the baby grow. It is an important part of pregnancy, but that's also why it's so easy to slip into gestational diabetes. And that's why I think it's like 1 in 4 women experience gestational diabetes, which is a form of temporary diabetes during pregnancy, which can have some adverse health effects on the mother and the baby. But I have seen that for a lot of my clients post-pregnancy, even after breastfeeding, unfortunately, insulin resistance can stick around. And this could be just from dietary habits that started in pregnancy, or could just simply be physiological, the compounding of pregnancy, and then also age, which, as you'll see, age can have an effect too. So it's a really big thing that tends to happen around this time. Now, what is really great about intermittent fasting is that you naturally get those lower levels of insulin that are going to be secreted simply because you're not eating during some point of the day just by fasting. So that in itself can just help along with that situation, which is why intermittent fasting post-pregnancy, which we'll get into some things about pregnancy and breastfeeding and intermittent fasting in a bit. But that's why post-pregnancy, it could be really great to just help with achieving the weight loss and wellness goals. And the insulin resistance that tends to go along with the pregnancy. So the other thing that can also happen during this time, if you do have kids, and this is something I see happen with almost all of my clients who have kids, the sneaky kids snacks that are everywhere. If you have kids and you see these all the time, just let me know in the chat, because I think every single one of my clients who has kids will talk to me about how it can be difficult to avoid some of those types of snack item foods that their kids have, or that they have for their kids, like goldfish or like cookies or whatever it might be. So that is also a really big factor, especially during 30s. Obviously can range in terms of when this happens, but 30s tends to be a big time. So looking at the steps for this, first things first, because there is some degree of insulin resistance going on, which can make it a little bit more difficult to start incorporating intermittent fasting, it's a good idea to first focus on food and ease into that transition. And the biggest thing here is to start swapping out some obvious insulin spiking offenders. That's really the biggest place to start off first, because especially post-pregnancy, a lot of types of foods that maybe you had during pregnancy that you wouldn't normally have, that might be higher in sugars or starches, might start to creep into day-to-day life after pregnancy. And that's definitely not going to help with the insulin resistance. So we first things first want to take a look at those obvious offenders and swap them out for the types of foods that aren't going to greatly spike insulin. And that can help make the transition to intermittent fasting a lot easier. So, some really obvious ones here, like croutons and salads, or baked goods, crackers, sugar sweetened drinks. This includes sugar sweetened teas and coffees, which I think sometimes a lot of us forget about. And then protein bars. You guys know my opinion on that. Breads, pastas, and then even many pasta alternatives, which really tend to not even be much better than the original source. Other than maybe it just doesn't have gluten. Great, but a lot of them are still highly refined, different types of starchy ingredients, like cassava flour is a really common one, or chickpea flour is another really common one. Just really refined, that from originally a whole food product, but really refined into a flour that's just going to greatly spike insulin. So instead of having things like that, incorporate things that don't greatly spike insulin instead. So this includes obviously the various fats that we discussed. So like avocado, olives, nuts, chia seeds, pumpkin seeds, almonds, walnuts, cheese, all those are great. One thing that my client Katie, which I think I saw that she is in here somewhere, she actually introduced to me a really great pasta alternative that's made out of hearts of palm. I think one's called like palmini or something like that. But that's actually a really great alternative to, like, if you don't love zucchini noodles, or if you don't love spaghetti squash, you could try that out. I've seen it at Whole Foods, but they also have it on Amazon, not associated with them whatsoever. I just thought it was a really good product. But swapping some of those obvious offenders for something that's not going to greatly spike insulin. That way, that area can first be addressed and make that transition from not fasting at all to then incorporating intermittent fasting a lot easier. Because like I mentioned, if you missed that part earlier, with pregnancy inherently comes some degree of insulin resistance, and even for some people, gestational diabetes. So you definitely want to take a look at your food first before jumping straight in to incorporating some type of fasting. And there's even some interesting studies where it found that this was something like, I think it was back in 2018. I'd have to dig up the original study, but there's been some interesting studies that found that women, even when given the dietary advice of swapping out some of these higher starchy ingredients for something that's not going to contain very much insulin spiking ingredients like avocado or some type of fats, women have a really difficult time doing this, just because we've been so drilled into our head that fat is bad for us that we might take away the pastas, but we don't really add any satiety factor back in, which just leaves us hungry and not able to sustain it. So really making sure that you're not just removing these items, but you're swapping it with something else that will bring satiety up, but not greatly spike insulin in the process. And then going back to the kids option, because this is something for kid snacks. Unfortunately, it's gotten so common to have these truly awful kid snacks available to all kids. And I know that in itself, there's so many barriers, like kids being at kids' houses, like other kids' houses rather, and seeing these snacks and wanting them at their house. So I totally understand there is much more of a nuanced topic, but trying to slowly swap out some of those foods that aren't going to help your kids either, but also aren't going to help you with your goals, getting those options swapped out for something that's at least a better option. So one really good option that I've done with a lot of my clients, so like goldfish or crackers, that tends to be a big one in the house, swapping that for something like these baked Parmesan crisps. I'm sure you guys have seen these around. They've gotten really popular. It's literally just Parmesan cheese that's been baked. So it's a great source of both protein and fat and not going to have those insulin spiking refined starches. So just little examples like that where you can start to incorporate more whole food options for kids anyway that hopefully they'll like just as much. And then it's not these temptations, these really greatly insulin spiking temptations that are around the house. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to say about that. Oh, right. So another question I get about this time, so with pregnancy and breastfeeding, asking like, can you use intermittent fasting while doing these? The thing to know about both pregnancy and breastfeeding is that there's hardly any studies done for anything on pregnancy and breastfeeding, simply for ethical reasons, because there is another being that's involved. So ethically, you can't really do a lot of studies on these groups, understandably. So there's really not much research to know if intermittent fasting can be used for either of these. Now, the thing with pregnancy is that it is a time where you do need to be taking in enough nutrients. So that's where you don't necessarily want to be incorporating some type of fasting. So really focus more so on the nutrients there rather than just having some type of fast. You really want to make sure you're getting enough nutrients for your child. Same-ish can go for breastfeeding. I have seen just more word of mouth from some people say that they have used breastfeeding or used intermittent fasting while breastfeeding and it's worked out for them. But this is still a time that you do want to make sure you're optimizing your nutrients for your child, which does also include the type of food you're eating, not just the frequency as well. So with those, ethically can't really give an opinion on that, but just know that there's not really been studies either way because you can't do studies on these groups typically. A lot of the studies that do refer to pregnancy and breastfeeding in regards to intermittent fasting are usually rat studies because you can't really do studies on pregnant or breastfeeding women. So either way, you want to just optimize for nutrients. Okay, that was a lot. I'm going to go into answering some questions. Trying to scroll back a bit, see if I missed a lot. Hi, Autumn's dad. Yes, my dad is in the chat. Hi, Dad. So someone asked, does Propel or Gatorade break your fast? I mean, both of those, unless you're getting like the sugar-free option, which has its own problems, which you can check out my latest keto foods video for that. But most of those are going to be loaded with sugar. So yes, that would break a fast. That would cause insulin to spike and would break a fast. Okay, so I'm seeing some questions on how to assess insulin resistance. There's actually quite, other than the test, which you don't necessarily need to be taking the test, but it is always a good idea to check with your doctor on that, just get a baseline. There are some areas that you can kind of use to assess insulin sensitivity or insulin resistance. One is waist to hip ratio. That's a big one because insulin resistance tends to show up right in the belly. So that's a really big one. You can, there's actually a really great insulin researcher I want to bring on the channel to talk a lot more about this topic specifically. So fingers crossed, I'm going to reach out to him soon and try and get him on the channel because it's a really, really important topic that thankfully now is getting more attention, but it could have even more attention on it and more understanding around the topic. Okay, so Aparna is asking how much carbohydrate is okay for a PCOS diet. So PCOS, like I mentioned, is strongly tied to insulin resistance. So it's a tricky area. It's not necessarily how much; it's also the quality of those carbohydrates. You really want to make sure that you're not getting the high glycemic starches, so that it's not going to greatly spike insulin. Definitely taking a look at the quality would be the biggest area first, and removing really any sugars because those are going to be the biggest insulin spikers. Good morning from San Antonio. Hi, Liz. I like how someone just says beer. I don't know what I said in what context, but beer. Okay, so Clara says, thank you for your work. What to eat on OMAD? Can you give some examples? Thank you very much. So OMAD, if you aren't familiar with that, is 1 meal a day. And some people do really well with it. I have seen that I just generally don't recommend it just because it is very hard to get namely enough protein in with just 1 meal a day. I mean, I've done videos in the past, which I also have linked down below to my protein calculation live stream. I think that's one I have linked down below. Definitely recommend that you check that out so you get an understanding of just how much roughly protein you need. Because with just 1 meal, because protein is so highly satiating, this can actually be really difficult to get enough protein for your body's needs at just 1 meal. Even 2 meals sometimes can be a little bit tricky. So, just if you are using OMAD, I do have some videos on OMAD. I don't have them linked below, but they are on my channel. If you just search like Autumn Bates OMAD, it should pop right up. But I do talk about more specifically what to look out for that because especially with protein, you really want to be making sure you're getting enough for your needs. Katie said, so glad you liked it. She's talking about the palmini or the hearts of palm pasta. Definitely a good one. So someone, Katie again said, it can really vary. For myself with PCOS, I do much better with much less sugar and carbs. Yeah, it's definitely dependent on each person. There is a level of carbohydrate sensitivity for each person and even a level of insulin resistance and the number of insulin receptors on each cell. There's a lot of individuality, which again is why I really want to bring on this insulin researcher soon to talk more about it. Whoa, just popped down. So someone is saying, sorry, I just logged on. You were mentioning PCOS. Do you have a video on that? I don't have a video specifically on that. I have touched on it here and there throughout some videos. Not really a specific topic though, but it is one I get a lot of questions about. So I definitely want to do one in the future. Well, good evening from Egypt. Hi, Noah. Amber's asking what protein powders would you recommend? Protein powders, very interesting area to discuss because unfortunately it's not very regulated. And there's been some consumer reports finding that there's just a lot of heavy metal exposure or pesticides in a lot of different types of protein powders. I do have a couple I recommend. I'm writing this down so I remember to put it in the description down below. But I do have a blog post where I go more deeper into this topic, but it's something that you definitely want to make sure that you're choosing one that's been at least tested for heavy metals because you don't want to be getting a great source of protein, but then loading yourself up with heavy metals in the process. And like I mentioned, unfortunately, it's just highly unregulated. So it's good to get those independent tests done. Okay, I'm going to continue on just so we can get through more of these. I will keep answering questions, but I see we're already at 30 minutes. I want to make sure we get through everything. Okay, so now we're in like that 50 plus range. So really this is like 40 plus. There's this is kind of where a lot of these can start to happen. But unfortunately, just with age in general, insulin resistance starts to go up. And not only that, but also as we age, protein intake starts to go down. You'll see why this is such a problem with intermittent fasting, because you do want to get the benefits of intermittent fasting to help at least with that insulin resistance aspect. But also, just like what I was referring to with the 30s group of the protein intake, or rather with the OMAD question earlier on, a big problem with shortening your eating window is getting less protein because it is so highly satiating. This is a really big problem just as we age. A lot of people start to consume too little protein for their needs. And considering that, muscle wasting, which is just muscle loss, tends to go up as we age, bone density goes down. A lot of things that rely on protein aren't really getting adequate amounts of protein because you're not eating enough. So, you do want to get that balance of helping to improve the insulin resistance while also getting enough protein. So this is where, especially for as we continue to age, it's going to likely be a better approach to look for more of a medium or shorter range of a fast while sticking to true meals. So rather than doing like that OMAD, for example, it's not to say that everyone past 40 can't use OMAD, but just from what I've seen, especially to consider the protein intake, it's a lot easier to get enough for your needs when you have a wider eating window. So looking at a fasting window of anywhere between 12 to 16 hours, really 16 hours being that upper limit, just to make sure that you are getting enough protein within that eating window. Something else I wanted to say regarding that. Oh, right. And growth hormone, which is another muscle protecting hormone, also tends to decrease as we age. So that is where having some type of fast can help to just optimize for growth hormone a bit. There's been multiple studies showing that intermittent fasting does help with that. Although you really see the accelerated benefits from a longer fasting period, like multiple days of fasting, but you do get some perks with some smaller amounts of fast too. But to help amplify that, having a true fast when you are fasting. So instead of having like coffee or tea during your fast, just having the water and electrolytes, that can help with just making sure it's optimizing for the growth hormone and of course the insulin while also getting enough protein in for your needs during that eating window. Which really I highly recommend if you have not seen it yet, checking out the live stream I did. I do have a link down below on how to calculate your protein needs. It does go really in depth and detail, so it's worth checking out the whole thing for, just so you can get a better idea of how much protein you should be getting in. And that in itself will help to dictate how long your eating window should be. And if you find that you can get all that in, all that protein in with one meal a day, and if you feel great with one meal a day, by all means, experiment with it, see how you feel. But also know that it's an option to have that wider eating window so that you can get those nutrient needs in. It's constantly finding a balance with this, with fasting and with your eating window, of making sure that you can get those benefits of fasting while also getting all of the nutrient needs you need to be getting in during your eating window. You want to find the balance that's going to work for you, and depending on your lifestyle, depending on your age, depending on your health history, that really can range. This is where, like if you're in that 40 plus category, having a slightly longer eating window might be more beneficial. If you're an athlete and you need a lot more protein, then you might do better with a slightly bigger eating window anyway. If you're not as active and if you do have a really busy schedule, you could probably get by with having a shorter eating window. It really is dependent on each person. It's not a one size fits all whatsoever. I know in the early days of intermittent fasting popularity, it was like, you must have your eating window be from 12 to 8 p.m. and that's what everyone should be doing. Absolutely not the case. We now know it's a much more nuanced situation. We need to be considering the protein. We need to be considering your nutrient needs, your schedule, where you're at in life, and how you can actually adapt this to your life and your health history. So that's a little bit of a rant, but I just went on, sorry for that. But it's just really to reiterate that it's not a one size fits all. There are factors that come into play, especially with protein, especially with your activity level and your schedule, and you really need to be addressing that to make sure it's fitting you, your lifestyle, and your health history. So that's the biggest thing for the 50s, is that insulin resistance does tend to go up protein intake tends to go down. So you want to find that balance, and you want to make sure that your eating window allows for the protein intake. And you can really optimize for that also by making sure you're having true meals. So remember, you do get that insulin level starting to dip back down just naturally when you are having gaps between your meals as well. So to help optimize further, you can just make sure that you're sticking with meals, which is what I would recommend anyway. So rather just not snacking in between. Okay, so let me just see first if there's anything else I wanted to say about this. Those are the main things for 50 plus. So let's see the questions right now. So a lot of questions about certain things, like asking certain things break a fast. So does CBD oil with organic MCT and citrus flavor break your fast? If it's a pure fat, it probably isn't going to cause an insulin spike. But like I mentioned, there are factors where having a true fast is merited. So like if you're looking for optimized gut healing or optimized growth hormone, this is where more of a true fast would be better. And having those supplements, even if they are a pure fat, during your eating window would be a better time. Okay. It's a really good question. So someone asked, can you make videos about mindset and how to control our thoughts? Yeah, I think that's a really good topic. It's something that is definitely very important, but it's also, I'm not sure where you're coming from with this question, but especially when it comes to like weight loss and wellness goals, I think people put a lot of emphasis on that mindset thing, thinking that they just have to like overcome hunger and overcome all these factors that we've been told for so long are involved with wellness and weight loss, when in reality, there is a hugely physiological side too, with the satiety hormones. And, there is some level of mindset, like sugar addiction, which is a very real thing. There is some level of addiction that people can have to certain foods, but we also need to address the physiological and making sure that your satiety levels are up so that you don't even have to fight yourself and your mentality as much. Okay, so Lara is asking, how do you change your window if you're going out for dinner once or twice a week? Great question. So it's like window shifting. So it's not necessarily changing your window. I just would rather you view it as shifting your window for that day and then the next day shifting back. So focusing more on the eating window rather than the fasting. That way you're not going to get in a cycle of constantly having to push your eating window later and later and later in the day and not ever getting back to your normal routine. So like, let's say your normal eating window is from like 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. But if it's a Friday night and you're going out to dinner and your dinner reservation's already been till 7 and you're not going to be done till 8, you can simply on that Friday shift your window by 2 hours to allow for that. So rather than starting at 10 a.m., you can just break your fast at 12 p.m. and then allow for that slightly lengthened time in the evening when normally you would be fasting. So the eating window is the only thing that's changing. Rather than looking at the fasting period and trying to catch up, this is a good way to then be able to just go back the next day to your original schedule. So with that same example, if you do that like window shifting to 8 p.m., the next day you would just then go back to a 10 a.m. Breaking of the fast. That way you can get right back on track with your usual schedule and not disrupt your life too much. So someone's asking about best vegan protein powder. I do have a whole blog post on that. I'm going to put it in the description down below. Someone asked about that earlier as well. After this live stream, I'm going to put that down in the description below. So just go back and check that out. Hello from Hong Kong. So someone is asking about soybean and soybean oil, and if it's good or just good for PCOS. I've not really done a video on the different types of oil products before. I've touched on it here and there, but there is a lot to consider with different oils and the how easily they go rancid and oxidize and when you want to use each one, because this actually is really important and probably not stressed enough, just because there's some oils that have been deemed healthy for so long, but in reality, they easily oxidize and cause a lot of oxidative damage in the body. So that's kind of like almost a whole video. In fact, maybe that's the next live stream. You guys know I always ask you what you want to have me talk about next time. So after this video ends, just make sure you comment down below, like down below the actual video, what you want to see in the next live stream. Maybe it's all different oils and fats. We'll see which one wins. This is the topic that won for when I put it in the community section on my YouTube channel. This is literally the topic that you guys chose. So I literally talk about what it is that you guys want to hear. So yeah, just tell me what you want me to talk about. Aloha from Kauai. Wow, I would love to go back there. So someone is also talking about the vitamin supplements. I talked about that in probably about 10 or 15 minutes ago if you want to scroll back a bit. I would love a video on oils. Great. So if you guys could, it's just hard to see all of them. If you could put the 4 question marks before an actual question, that's really helpful. Okay, please do a video on PCOS and insulin resistance friendly foods for Indians. Great, that's a good one. Okay, can I have my breakfast smoothie right after I have my ACV? Yeah, in fact, the ACV, which is apple cider vinegar sipper from the complete intermittent fasting bundle, also linked down description below. That's actually intended to have about that 15 minutes before you're going to have your smoothie or your break fast. Apple cider vinegar in general has been studied to help with that postprandial blood glucose level and stabilizing those. So you do want to actually have it kind of close to your meal. So it's a good time to be having it. Okay, what about people over 70? Same thing, but actually with even more of an emphasis on protein. So if you are over 70 and if you're on medications, go back to what I was talking about on medications and just making sure that you're checking that if there's certain times you need to be taking those, let your doctor know if you do want to use intermittent fasting. So if they need to adjust anything, they can. Or it might just be contraindicated for you depending on your health history. So if you're over 70, really just checking on the medications, but also the protein is so huge. So scroll back to what I was talking about for over really 40 and 50 with the increased insulin resistance and decreased protein intake. New kitchen looks different. Yes, it is different. We moved a couple months ago. What's your opinion on artificial sweeteners? Check out my latest video from last Thursday. I think I'm very clear on that one. Okay, I'm just starting out and I'm never satiated after a smoothie. What else can I have with my smoothie to break my fast? I would first things first, check to see if you're getting adequate protein with your smoothie. So a lot of the depending on the protein powder or if you're using Greek yogurt, typically it's going to be about 20 grams worth of protein with the protein powder per serving. So if you calculate your protein, you find out like, oh, actually I really should be getting 40 grams at each meal, then you should be doubling up on the protein there. Same thing, or if you're using Greek yogurt, doubling up on the Greek yogurt. So you first want to check your protein, and then you could always add fats to satiety. So adding another 1 to 2 servings of like peanut butter or chia seeds or flax seeds, whatever it might be. I also have a whole list of options of what you can add in the Level Up guide in the complete intermittent fasting bundle. So adjust those two to your satiety. First things first, looking at protein, next looking at fats. Another great little kind of like hack with smoothies is to add on some type of crunchy topping. So that just like chewing sensation can just help to slow down the consumption of it, which also can help to allow the actual satiety hormones to kick in. So I like to add on something like cacao nibs, obviously is historically one of my favorites. And it's a great source of fiber sneakily too. But also unsweetened coconut flakes, like toasted coconut flakes, are amazing as a topping. So just go through that sequence. First look at protein, then look at fats, and then add on some type of crunchy zero sugar topping. Okay, Allison said, wine consumption every day or only limited days? Multiple things here. First things first, what type of wine are you having? I really recommend looking into the zero sugar wines, like dry farmed wines, just because you want to make sure that you're not having excessive amounts of sugar, obviously. But also each person's, this is unfortunately another one of those annoying answers on it depends, but the less frequent that you can get it, the better. So looking at like 2 to 3 drinks per week is probably a good area to shoot for, because the liver does break down the alcohol and the liver can get very taxed, especially if you are having a lot of fructose in the diet currently as well, which fructose is like that fruit sugar, but it's also in just cane sugar. It's in a lot of things, really high in fruit juices. all of that needs to be broken down by the liver. And if you're having a lot of alcohol and then a lot of these other types of foods that also tax the liver, then that can really, not harm the liver, but it can really be difficult for the liver to break down. And eventually, if it can't process all of that, it'll start storing that fat on the outside of the liver as fat. Just converting it into fat, storing it as fat on the outside of the liver, and that could even eventually lead to something called fatty liver disease. So you do want to just moderate your intake, 2 to 3 glasses. Make sure it's not containing very much sugar or any sugar, ideally, because the fructose plus the alcohol combined, that combination is really taxing on the liver. Okay. Love you. Thank you. You're welcome. So some people asking about workouts and insulin resistance. Again, this is, I haven't done videos like specifically on insulin resistance, but it does seem to be something you guys are asking a lot about. And it's such a big topic. It really is something that I could do a bunch of videos on, and I probably will in the future, but it also might be better for a live stream, or at least maybe do both. So let me know again in the comments below what you'd like to see. So far I've talked about oils, insulin resistance. I'm up for all of it. Just tell me what you want. Okay. Hello from LA. No nutritionist is going to defend artificial sweeteners. You'd be surprised. Okay, so hello from Alabama. Eating smoothies, drinking smoothies to break a fast. I mean, you guys know I'm a big fan of smoothies. I have smoothies pretty much every day to break a fast. It just depends on what's in them. So if it's just like a straight up fruit smoothie, since we were just talking about fructose, that is loaded with fructose. So much fructose, so much impact on the liver. This could actually increase a process called de novo lipogenesis, which is new fat creation. It's just really depends on the type of smoothie. I do have a lot of smoothie recipes, both on my channel and in my programs, which are linked down below. But you just want to make sure you're covering your nutrient bases, that it's actually containing what you would need from a meal. So still having the protein, still having the fat, still having the fiber, and not having a ton of the sugar either. So using high quality, lower sugar fruits to sweeten it up a bit. That's a good formula to be addressing your smoothies with. It also completely follows the A in nutrient timing from the bundle as well. But you can check out some examples of this. I have a lot of free recipes on my channel. I also have a ton of recipes in the bundle, which is linked down below. Okay, so this is a great question. Marnie is asking, when fasting, do we have to be consistent with the same time? This kind of goes back to that window shifting that I was talking about, where you absolutely can shift your window, and you should shift your window if you do have some like social engagement going on, which is such a funny way to say it. If you're going out with friends, you can shift your window, and you should. Otherwise, you're going to be left out, and you won't be able to experience a nice celebratory time. And you also are just not going to be able to sustain that. So you absolutely should shift your window, but I do recommend trying to be as consistent as possible on those other days. So like your work days, trying to have some level of consistency, not necessarily because of the fasting, like the impact the fasting will have on your body, more so just because it can help make it more of a routine and a habit. And the more that we can make things more of a routine and a habit, the easier it is to implement long term. And then just knowing that you can shift back and forth when you have some type of social engagement, which is such, again, a funny way to say it. Such a technical way to say it. You have a party to go to. Just kidding. What are the health benefits of eating liver? A lot. Liver is essentially like taking a supplement. 1 second, I need some water. Liver is something I've been trying to get myself to eat. It's not even that I think it tastes bad. I've just never tried it before, but it's an amazing source of vitamin A, and we just don't efficiently convert beta carotene to vitamin A, which is like the another version that can be converted into vitamin A. And getting it from liver is one of the easiest ways to get it. You can have I think it's 3 or 4 ounces of liver a week, and it completely covers your needs for vitamin A. Vitamin A vitamin D, vitamin K2. Those all are so interlinked and all are so important to be working together. And if one of those is out of balance, it can really throw a lot of things out of balance. So, vitamin D often gets a lot of attention, as it should. It's really important. But vitamin K2, which is something we've been talking a lot about, if you're taking vitamin D supplement, but you're not getting vitamin K2 rich foods, this can actually increase deficiency of vitamin K2, because what happens is vitamin D helps to promote the creation of these proteins that vitamin K2 then activates. And vitamin K2, if you have a ton of these proteins that are being created because you're taking a ton of vitamin D, then that means that you have a ton of these proteins that need to be activated by vitamin K2. And if you're not eating enough of those vitamin K2 rich foods, then that can just increase deficiency. So same thing with vitamin A. These three kind of work together. They kind of all balance each other out. So liver is a really great way to be getting in enough vitamin A to help balance this out. But vitamin K2 rich, so liver is really rich in vitamin A. Some foods that also are would be like pasture-raised eggs is another good source, but liver is definitely like the highest, which is why a lot of traditional cultures eat it. It is definitely like a multivitamin, multi-supplement at that point. Okay. Topics on your smoothie so you have something to chew on and can't gulp it. Camille, I love it. Great question. That's definitely something we could talk about in the future. All right, let me get back to the bottom. Vitamin K2, yeah. Yeah, is it NATO or NATO? I never am quite sure on how to pronounce that. That's another great source of vitamin K2. That's like the key plant-based source of vitamin K2. Otherwise, the main sources of vitamin K2 are going to be like grass-fed dairy products, eggs, and grass-fed meats. Because what happens is K1 is actually formed in K1 is like a precursor. It's formed in a lot of plants, but we don't really efficiently convert K1 into K2. So we get it from like animals that then convert it into K2 within themselves. But natto or natto, however it's pronounced, is a fermented soybean product. I've never tried it. I've heard it's a very acquired taste. Some people love it, but it is a way to get it from a plant-based source if you are plant-based. There's also supplements. I mean, I'm always for more of getting things from an actual food source, because there's always going to be this symbiotic relationship between these various nutrients. So it's kind of like the most assured way to be getting everything you need is from an actual food source. But if you really can't have any of these options, there's always a supplement as well. Hi from England. Hi, Michael. Is it necessary to take vitamin D supplement? It depends on where you live and how much sun you're getting. So if you're able to get about 20 minutes of full sun exposure and you live within a certain parallel of the earth, where you actually get more of that direct sun exposure, then you should be fine. But a lot of people are deficient in vitamin D. So it is something where you could get a super simple blood test done by either your doctor, or there's at-home blood tests where you can get it done. Like Everlywell is a common one where you can get a blood test to check your vitamin D levels. But you don't necessarily need to be taking these things. You can get it for free from the sun, depending on where you live and the time of year. But you should check to see where your levels are at. Check in with your doctor, see if you can get a blood test done with that. So someone's asking about eating disorders and intermittent fasting. I did do a really great interview. I think it was like a year and a half ago with a therapist who specializes in eating disorders. So just check that one out. Look up intermittent fasting and eating disorders. Should pop up as like one of the first videos. That one goes more into the topic there. Natto. So it's pronounced natto. Okay, I'm going to take your word for it. Yeah, so Sarah, along with getting enough daily protein, is there a certain amount of daily fats recommended, and can you have too much of those important fats? Yes. So Fats should be used as essentially the additional level of satiety after protein. So protein is the key level of satiety that you need, or satiety, if you're new here, means that feeling of fullness or satisfaction after a meal. So protein is that key cornerstone that you want for your meal to make sure you're getting enough of that first. If you've addressed that, the next aspect is the fat. So that's where you can use fat to satiety to make sure that you're getting enough of the fats to feel satiated along with the proteins. I cover this a lot in the complete intermittent fasting bundle with suggested amounts that you can use. But also this can range. You can increase it per serving. If you are way more active and you need a lot more energy, then obviously you would increase a serving of fat there. But you do want to use fat as that additional layer of satiety. Protein is the key. So addressing your protein, that's why that's really the only one that I ever have people just calculate to get an idea of how much protein they need, because it is really important to have for everything within the body, for creating new cells, for creating hormones, for feeling satiated, for your bones, your skin, your muscles. It's used for everything. So you want to make sure first things first, you're getting enough of that, and then using additional fats for satiety as well. Okay, I need some water. But in the meantime, if you guys have been liking this so far, give a thumbs up. Okay. Great question. So Kelly is asking, if I'm using the vanilla flavored Fourth and Heart ghee in my keto coffee, will the vanilla break my fast? Should I use the plain ghee instead? If I remember correctly, because I think I have some of this in my pantry as well, the vanilla is using just literally vanilla bean. It's kind of infusing the flavor in. It's not like a sweetener or anything like that. So if that's the case, then that should be completely fine. But if it does have any sugar in it, which I don't think it does, then yeah, that would break a fast. So Jackie is talking about vitamin A poisoning. It's a very, very nuanced topic with vitamin A. There's a really great book, if you guys want to check it out, on this kind of vitamin D and calcium and vitamin K2 and vitamin A complex. I believe it's called The Calcium Paradox, and it covers this whole topic. It's a really great one. It's kind of gets a little bit in the nitty gritty, but if you are really interested in the science, it's a good one to be checking out, because it's easy to get lost in a lot of just individual studies rather than looking at the big picture and what the body needs, and if you're getting enough of it, and if it's harmful or if it's great for you. So definitely recommend checking that out if you are interested in the topic. Otherwise, maybe I'll get her on here as well. Maybe I just turn this into a podcast and just get people on here. How many times to eat fruits per week is okay to consume daily? So first things first, taking a look at the sugar quality or the sugar content of the fruits that you're having. Some that are really just rich in sugar should be treated more like a dessert. Things like mango and papaya are loaded with sugar. So especially if you have some degree of insulin resistance, then you want to stick with those lower sugar, higher fiber fruits. So it helps slow the release of the sugar into the body. So it's just a lower glycemic approach. Each person can have, some people can have like a couple servings of fruit or multiple servings of fruit per day and be fine, especially if you don't have any degree of insulin resistance. But if you do, then you want to just, first things first, focus on the things that are going to be most driving your goals. So the proteins and fats and the fibers, those three components of your meals really should be what you're centered around, and then using those low sugar fruits for flavoring. That's just a good way to always approach it. Would love a podcast. Maybe one day when I get enough time. Oh, I didn't realize Becca was on here. I saw Camille say hi, but hi, Becca. Becca's part of the AN team. She's very helpful, helps me do what I do every day. Okay, I'm going to answer like one or two more questions. So Michael's asking, oh, wait. There's two good questions that popped up back to back. Michael first. asked, what are your thoughts about ghee and MCT oil instead of coconut oil in the morning? Ghee is great. So ghee is essentially just the same thing as butter, but it's just been more, where they just take butter, they boil off the excess lactose, which there already is such low amounts of lactose in butter. It just really clarifies it, really pulls out any left behind lactose. So if you're lactose sensitive or very lactose sensitive, ghee would be a better one to experiment with and see how you feel. I like butter better just because I think it doesn't taste as oily in the coffee, and it makes like a really good froth. And I've heard other people say that they've experienced this as well. So, test it out, see how you feel. But I tend to like butter better. But if you are way more like lactose intolerant, then ghee would be a better option. I believe the other question was MCT oil instead of coconut oil. So here's the thing with MCT oil. There's a lot of really great research on MCT oil that's like focused on how it can help improve satiety, help with increasing fat burning. All that is really great. My hesitation, and I will blatantly say there's no research that I've seen that really can back this, but just from what I've seen historically, the more that we refine a food, the more that we tend to see problems with it. So that's my one concern about MCT oil, is that it is a really just they extract the medium chain triglycerides from an oil, which already is taken from an original source of a food. So it's just something I'm always hesitant on recommending. I usually try and recommend the more whole food option if possible. If you do better with MCT has been studied to show it has a higher satiety factor than just coconut oil itself, but I'm just hesitant with it because historically speaking, the more that we refine or process something, the more we tend to find out 10 or 20 or 50 years later that it was harmful. So it's not to say that this will happen with MCT. It's just I'm erring on the side of history with that one. Okay. Oh, so many great questions. Coconut oil is a lot cheaper too. Yep. Kelly says coconut oil is a lot cheaper too. Yes, it is. So many questions here. I want to get to the one I saw someone ask about electrolytes, because I'm actually talking about that, I think, in this week's video. It is so highly important, especially if you are using intermittent fasting and a lower insulin spiking food approach. As insulin levels go down, something happens with our kidneys where it starts to release a lot of excess water and sodium, especially sodium. The loss of sodium can also trigger the loss of potassium, but sodium is the biggest one that is lost in the greatest amounts. And we use sodium to help send messages from our brain to the rest of our body. It's literally used in something called sodium ion channels to help neurons send their message, or not to help, to allow the neurons to send their message. It's used for muscle contraction. It's used for fluid balance within the body. It's used for so much, and it's so easy to get an imbalance of sodium if you are having the lower insulin spiking food approach and using intermittent fasting, because it's lost in such great amounts. It can, with that loss in great amounts of water and sodium, it can result in that lower blood volume, which has been noted by some people why perhaps blood pressure changes, where it tends to go down a bit. But it is really important to be getting that electrolyte balance, especially with sodium. And if you're also cutting out a lot of these processed foods that would already have, not a good amount of sodium because it's going along the ride with the processed foods. But if you're cutting those out in the process, you're not really getting any sodium at all, and you're releasing quite a bit. So you do want to make sure that you are taking a look at your electrolytes, namely sodium. And unfortunately, a lot of electrolyte companies just don't account for sodium. They completely leave it out. They will add in important things like potassium and magnesium, which is great, but it's not really addressing the sodium. So I do talk about this a lot in an upcoming video this week because it is so important. It's also a really big key feature in the upcoming summer challenge, as you guys will see. More on that in a bit. Make sure you stay tuned for the next live stream. But electrolytes are so important. It can really help you feel a lot better too. There's even been studies showing that having low sodium can cause insulin resistance to go up. That was another from an insulin researcher that's been studying this has found that. So there's a lot of variables when it comes to sodium, but especially if you are having like a high processed food diet, you're already getting sodium from the processed food and high insulin from the processed food. So you don't really need to be worrying about it there. But if you are using intermittent fasting in a lower insulin spiking approach and you're not getting high quality sources of sodium, then that's where, at the very least, making sure that you're salting your food will be so important. I talk a lot about Celtic sea salt. I know some people aren't a fan of adding salt straight into their water, and there is a time and a place for certain electrolyte powders to be added in if you can't tolerate just adding in salt. But like I mentioned, I'll be talking more about that in Thursday. I think it's Thursday's video, so stay tuned. That was such a rant. I felt my inner nutrition nerd, as if it's inner and it's not just always out, but just really go out for that one. Thanks for the answer. You're welcome. Yeah, also do salt and ACV in the morning. Great. Becca, electrolytes are such a game changer. They really are, especially if you're exercising. I mean, if you're exercising and doing intermittent fasting and you're eating a lower insulin spiking diet, then it's so important to be getting in some type of electrolyte replacement. But yeah, there are, like I mentioned, there are times when you would, if you already are eating a high processed food diet and if you are getting a ton of not great sodium, that's the first area that you want to address is the processed food. It's really in the circumstance of where you are going to get electrolyte imbalance from that release of water that it is really important. Brittany says, I saw you have a wedding guide, but I didn't see it when purchasing the bundle. Am I missing it? It's in the Level Up guide. So in the Level Up guide, there's 6 different protocols that are each tailored to different types of goals. So the wedding protocol is actually the one I'm following right now. Finally, our wedding is coming up. I think it's in like 4.5 months or 4 months. Crazy. So yeah, that's in the Level Up guide. It's the last protocol within the bundle. So you can check that out, which the bundle listed down in the description below if you guys want to check that out. Okay. So the next live stream will be announcing the Summer Intermittent Fasting Challenge. So stay tuned. And I also will be planning with the upcoming summer challenge, I will be doing the weekly live streams again as well. So I want to be planning those out based off of the information that you guys actually want to hear about. Literally this and every live stream is always based off of what you guys are asking for. I will never do content on something that you guys have no interest in. So if you want to actually have some input on that, let me know in the comments below. If you aren't subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe because that's where I also do the poll on each live stream to see what topic you guys would like to see. So you'll be able to actually participate in the poll there. And if you are subscribed, make sure that you might hit the notification bell as well so that you can see when the live stream is coming up for the summer challenge details because, oh my gosh, I am so excited for it. I've been working on the summer challenge for like 7 months now. It's been a huge part of my life for the past 7 months, and I'm really, really, really excited to share it with you guys soon. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Otherwise, my sad cold keto coffee, I did not get to it right now. Keto coffee, cheers. Very excited for you guys to participate in the upcoming challenge, but thank you guys for tuning in and all the amazing questions. I really appreciate just you guys being interested in nerding out with me on nutrition. So thank you for that. But otherwise, thanks guys for tuning in and I'll see you in the next live stream. Bye.